ever had that moment where you've been just ducking across the road through some traffic and looked up and suddenly wondered if it was really a good idea at all? This is about the closest angle I could find in photos of one of our clients' trucks. And to seeing one of these beasts bearing down on me as I nipped across Quay Street one day. And I remember thinking to myself, if I trip at this moment, I'm going to go underneath this truck. And then I was thinking how ironic it would be to die under a truck running one of our apps. And then just as I got to the other side, the next thing I thought is there actually is no "I just killed a pedestrian" button in our app. Maybe there should be. Anyway, my talk's called Heavy, Dirty and Smelly, and I'm sharing some of the learnings from our last few years of creating apps for some rather non-office type environments. Unusual situations like building apps for people who really don't want to use them, and for environments that are hostile to the hardware they run on. Most of us as app developers and related UX people and so forth work in office type environments, and that can be very different to the environments that users are in, especially as apps find their way out into more traditional kinds of industries. So what we'll do is just go through some key screens of a couple of example apps. This first one that I'm going to go through is an app that we built for a bulk haulage trucking fleet. And it runs on an Android tablet on the dashboard, mounted on the dashboard of each of the trucks. Now it replaces the old crackly RT system, and it also replaces a whole bunch of kind of messy paperwork and folders and calculators and pens and things that the drivers had to use as part of their whole weight compliance regime. First screen is pretty dull, but it does illustrate one of the key things that we had to deal with, which is that we were told that some of the users, some of the drivers were pretty old school, and that if it wasn't super simple, if they got it all frustrated, they'd just give up using it, refuse to use it, maybe even actually rip it out of their truck. So we really tried to go as much as possible with an original Apple mouse style concept. If there's only one thing to do, it shouldn't be too hard. There's nothing else you can do on this screen except click the blue button to open the job. Once you open the job, there is actually more contextual information you can drill into if you want to, or bring up a map to show you the way, or you can hit back. But most of the drivers know the routes anyway, and mainly they just hit the big blue next button. So it's a guided workflow, just keep hitting the big blue button. The screen was my brainchild. I feel it's quite impressive. But I figured that you don't want the driver of an over 55-tonne truck getting too distracted by an app whilst they're driving and just taking out a few cars or something. And I have heard stories of these trucks hitting cars and not even realising it. They're that heavy. In fact, one situation, apparently the driver hit a car and on the motorway, and the car spun around sideways, became stuck to the front of the truck, was being pushed sideways down the motorway with smoke pouring out its tyres, and the truck driver was just singing away to a song and had no idea whatsoever. You can imagine the terror of the poor person in the car. So when they get to the place where they're picking up a load, this is the screen they then get. And the beauty of this screen, I think, is that it makes numbers meaningful. What they had before was a form and numbers. The truck drivers knew what it was, hopefully, but this really takes all the confusion out of understanding how a truck should be loaded, because it shows it against the schematic of their particular truck. The app actually picks up the right image for the truck they're in. Still just one main button to keep going. Once the truck has been loaded, they then come out, they have to go across a weighbridge to ensure that their weights are compliant. As they roll each axle set onto the weighbridge, the number on the screen of the weighbridge will change to reflect the new weight. They used to have to calculate all this. What they do now is they just enter each of those numbers into the 4 boxes, and the app calculates the 9 numbers that NZTA requires as a log of the spread of weights across that truck. It'll show them if any weight needs moving, in which case they have to go back and get it moved around. Otherwise, they save it, it gets pushed out to a cloud system and ultimately reported to NZTA. One of the challenges here is that obviously when you're driving about in trucks, you don't always have 3G, 4G coverage everywhere. So we had to engineer a system whereby this mission critical app grabbed data when it could, sent data when it could, and just cached and ran everything locally in between. So some of the main learnings that we got over the process of building this in recent years was that simplicity really can win over those resistant users. They actually love it. That there are times when people in the field might actually be doing dangerous jobs, and you have to take that into account in not distracting them at certain times. That mission critical processes need to be tolerant of loss of connection, which will be common out in the field. And also, of course, these devices need locking down. You need to make sure that they're a tool, not a PlayStation. The problem is obviously if users are using it for other things, they'll mess up your settings, they'll mess up the software. And also, remote deployment's really important. You're not going to go out and try and find 100 trucks to update your software. We used a product called Yoobee Control, which I highly recommend if you're looking for that kind of solution. So a second application example is for recording fire safety installations, and this is used by a foreman type person, so it can bear a little more complexity than the driver app. I'm just going to go through very key screens, but in essence they select the building and they select the plan they want to work with. They open it, they can use normal gestures to pan and zoom and so forth around the plans. They can open markers and add new markers and put installation information into the app. We used a lot of autocompletes, so this whole form, it knows all the products that they might use, it knows the wall types, it knows the fire ratings and so forth. So they can very quickly just, with a few keystrokes, fill in and select each field, click the capture button, point it at the work they've done to take a photographic record of that work, and then hit print to produce the label which for compliance reasons they need to put on the wall next to the work. The label goes to a Bluetooth printer. I was going to say little, but they're actually kind of bulky. That goes in a kind of webbing unit on the workman's belt. There was a few learnings that we had in regards to these printers. The obvious one was that we knew that it would probably need to be able to take a bit of a bash and handle some grit and dirt and that kind of thing. But the other things that we discovered was that we really had to use direct transfer printing rather than thermal, because hot plant rooms made the thermal labels go brown, and we needed to use polymer labels rather than paper because damp environments made the paper ones go soggy and fall off, so they weren't going to last the required 20 years. That was an interesting process. One of the key kind of UX challenges we had to solve during building this app was that in a building, often a lot of services will go through a wall in pretty much the same place or on top of each other, which looks like the same place on a 2D plan. And we didn't want stacks of markers all sitting on top of each other and being hard to sort through. So we came up with a system, which you'll see in the side panel, of being able to actually put multiple bits of data, which you can then previous, next, scroll through or add onto for any given marker. Once they've done all that work, they just come in, they can save it, their work to the cloud, direct from the tablet. They can also send a report direct to the client, pre-editing the standard email that's there. The client gets a link in their email, opens the building report, so this can be 5 minutes after it was done. And this is just one page, but effectively they see all the plans with the markers and the record of work that was done underneath each, with a link through to view the photo to prove that they did the work. So key learnings from this was making sure that you've got equipment that can handle the environment. The tablets themselves, we normally put ruggedized cases around. Understanding the environment and how that affects product user requirements, like the printer situation I was talking about, and also understanding the impediments of the workplace. Fortunately, this is being used by a foreman type person. If it had been the workers themselves, they'd often have goo and stuff on their hands, and that'd be pretty tricky if you're trying to get them to use a touch screen. So I'm not going to go through all of these summary questions. I've just put them out there as good questions to ask when looking at this kind of environment. And you can just scan over them. You can pick them up from the video later if you're really interested. The main thing I want to mention out of here is just the last one. One of our key focuses in this is that for business owners, it may all be about efficiency, accuracy, productivity, but we also really like to make sure that it's about making people's working lives happier each day, just making it easier, smoother, more enjoyable. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions about any of this, please feel free to use Twitter or just come and chat to me later. Thank you.
So I have a question for you, John.
Yep.
Lots of people in the room will just be designing in nice, clean digital environments.
Yep.
What is the difference when you bring hardware and the outdoors into that situation?
It gets wrecked. The hardware gets wrecked. So that's one of your main challenges, is making sure the hardware actually keeps operating. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, John.